This is the second day of the December 88 7-day retreat in Springwater. Someone mentioned, and I don't remember the exact words, so it's not a verbatim quote. I have a certain discomfort in a situation in which there is a teacher and students. You being there behind the microphone and knowing something, and the students not knowing anything. I'm suspicious of a situation like this. I think it behooves one to be suspicious in the best sense of the word. Of listening to someone who claims to know, talking to those who don't know from his or her knowledge. Handing the knowledge down or over. We talked about that yesterday quite at length, that this is not what these talks are about. And yet, as we agreed, as we were talking about this, the setup seems to imply that through association. Someone sitting sort of in front and everybody grouped around and there being a microphone and just one person talking. The others listening. But it isn't like that. And how can that be made clear without being defensive or wanting to convince anyone? There are several topics that have come up in meetings which I feel great urgency to talk about, to look at. And each one of them, even though most of them are recurring themes throughout the years and throughout the retreats, each one of them, can we start from not knowing the answer? If the mind is in a state of looking and wondering, it isn't in the state of knowing. And therefore things can be looked at freshly as for the first time. True, there's memory supplying the language, memory supplying examples, remembered examples of what happened. And yet, the looking is fresh, the wondering is fresh. And the topics are supplied by all of us. These are our common problems that we're talking about. Not your problems which I have solved. We're looking at it together as a common human problem, not just concerning us in this room, but everyone in this world. That's the beauty of this work, in looking at something carefully, caringly. attentively, not with a solution or an answer, but wondering about it. In that we're looking at a human problem cropping up everywhere. In human beings like you and me and all of us. So if anyone has a better suggestion for a format which is less reminiscent of classroom, college teaching situations or spiritual teaching situations, then we will experiment with this. We're not tied to any particular form here or format. And we'll try it out, experiment with it, see whether it works better. But we're also here to become aware of what situations remind one of, the tremendous impact of remembered association and the associated feelings with these remembrances. Feeling of or maybe rebellion against someone preaching, because one has felt it very early in one's life, having to go to church, listen to the priest or minister. Suspicion about dogma handed down, compulsion of being told what to do, and the resistance against it or the questioning of it. To let the mind be open and porous, moving, bringing up what something reminds one of, and seeing that one's response may not be appropriate for this situation. It's an ancient response to a new situation. Which doesn't mean one doesn't have to question the present situation, whether it's really new. That's when we will all flourish, when we're all questioning and communicating our doubts to each other. And therefore, the word that suggests itself as a cleansing process taking place. Not said morally, but a dropping off of things that have not been seen or not been noticed or looked at and which are not necessary in a format, for instance. We've done it all along. Drop things. Someone asking maybe, why are we still doing that? Looking and realizing, well, we don't need to do that anymore. It serves no function anymore. And can one do this internally? See all the habits that go on, and one doesn't need to go on with them if one is aware of it. One question that comes up, whether one is here for the first time at a retreat or at the uncountablest time, here or in Europe or on the West Coast, it doesn't matter where. The question is, what is this awareness you're talking about? Am I really aware when I think I'm aware? Or am I just thinking about myself? That's already a question coming out of some insight, that I may just be thinking about myself and think that I'm aware. Because usually, as we think about ourselves and are not aware that we're thinking, we think we're aware. So what is this awareness? Is this thinking about oneself? And as there are glimpses, a sort of waking up to the fact that there was thinking going on, which is a moment of awareness, realizing that there was thinking going on, then what happens at that instant? Waking up to the fact that a fantasy has been going on, or a thought train about myself in one situation or another, in one way or another, thinking, fantasizing about myself. And an instant of awareness of that. What happens at that moment, usually? All depends on what it is that one has suddenly become aware of, whether maybe it were angry thoughts or desirous thoughts or fearful thoughts. There's a sudden awareness of that. And then as quick as the instant of waking up to that is a new thought about what one has been thinking about. I shouldn't be angry, or I wish I wasn't afraid, or how can I overcome this fear? Or if these were thoughts, thinking about past pleasures, desiring more of it, then maybe one will just go right on with it. Because it felt so good. Or one may feel and think, I shouldn't have desires. How can I cut off desires? Or one may think, why can't I be more attentive? Here I've been thinking again, and not realizing at this instant the thinking is continuing. We often say, like at a train station. I just came back from Switzerland, where you take a train quite easily and with great facility. You get out and you got out in Zurich, and you just stepped across. No, you just took a few steps, and there is the train that takes you into the airport. Out of one train into the next with no delay. And this is how it goes with the trains of thought. Out of one train of thought, a minute of pausing, train comes to a halt, and into the next train. Must be careful not to get too entangled in the metaphor, because now one sees trains. Maybe wishes one was in Switzerland too. How lovely it would be to take a train not to the airport but into the mountains. And one doesn't listen to the talk. But one can see that this is going on. That's the amazing beauty of this life as a human being. That things come, we say something suddenly comes to mind. There we usually refer to thoughts, but there can be an opening, an insight. And one will not be able to say where it came from, unless one has been indoctrinated to say it comes because of what you've been practicing, or what you've been believing, or what you've been praying to. One can believe that, what the cause is, but if one really looks, one finds no cause. I haven't found one. The cause for suddenly coming to. A remembrance comes up right now. I don't know if I've ever talked about it. Maybe I have. If you've heard it before, can we listen and talk about it freshly? It was after we had just adopted a little baby, and we had been waiting so long for this baby that I hadn't even thought we would ever have one soon, and there suddenly was a call within 6 days or so, you'll have a baby if you want him or her. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And just trying to muster all my knowledge about what one does with babies once we had him home. And one thing I remembered, you have to burp the baby after the baby has had a bottle. So I still can remember myself sitting in that room on a chair and the baby on the shoulder and patting dutifully on the back of this baby. And that baby was not an easy burper. Later on I gave this up. The doctor said, just put him on his stomach, he'll burp himself. But at that moment I hadn't found that out. I was just patting. I don't know what thoughts were in my mind. Patting, maybe rocking a little bit, and more patting. No results. And suddenly, something changed. And all I can say, what changed was that I wasn't separate from this baby. I wasn't the doer of something to this baby. There was a complete shift of everything. There was no task to be accomplished, nothing that needed effort. Everything seemed so natural. And this instant was accompanied by an enormous overflow of joy and love. I couldn't wait till Kyle came home to report to him what had happened. That was long before I'd ever heard of Zen or read any stories about what can happen to the mind. But I noticed as I was trying to report about it, somehow or other it didn't sound like it. I couldn't describe it. I kept saying one doesn't have to do anything. And maybe this wasn't new to him because he could burp this baby. But what I'm saying is, what brought it about? I'd never heard of Zazen or spiritual practice. It happened that there is no division. That there doesn't need to be this tremendous effort of me doing something, accomplishing something, having a result. That in this new frame, things happened easy. The state, as I remember back, didn't last. But I don't know whether something completely ever shifted back into this tremendous feeling of isolation and separation that I suffered from. So, if there is a moment of this, an insight or waking up to what has been going on, is it possible to abstain from berating oneself for what one did, that one did think or did have desire, or that one was angry or is angry, and the so heavily conditioned urge to do something about ourselves and our environment, and stopping to look and listen or feel, be open to what is actually going on without knowing how this whole thing is going to continue. feeling the urges. Maybe the next train has been entered, but maybe there's a moment of attention very quickly, because we're talking about it right now. We're concerned with it. We're looking at it and listening together, exploring together. This kind of work together seems to have something to do with noticing things quicker. Maybe not. I don't want to go too much into cause and effect things, and yet there's something that helps, as people tell me. Concern about something, talking about it, listening to a talk, discussing and exploring in a meeting somehow helps to see something, or to now or later, or as one goes along. Or reading books that deal with observing the human mind, being intimate and in touch with what happens, not judgmentally, or with the ideal of changing it into something else, but with a passionate interest to find out, how do we live from moment to moment, alone and in relationship with each other, here and everywhere else in this world. Because in exploring about ourselves and our interrelationship with each other, we're exploring interrelationship everywhere in this world. It's the same consciousness that is being explored, that pervades all human minds. So as one becomes aware of following a goal or an ideal state that one wants to achieve, being aware of that, can one ask, well, what is going on actually now, this instant? Not the enlightenment that I want to attain, but what is the feeling of darkness right now? Wonder about it. Open up to it. Try to touch it, the texture of the feel of it, the sound of it, the looks of it, as it manifests right now. One person said it feels murky, hazy. There's no focus in it. So can one stay with this murky haziness? And once the descriptive word has emerged and come up, to put it down again, put it away, because the word has its associations and impact on the body, but it isn't the situation itself. It's already a step away and into a new train. So what is this murkiness, haziness? Not the word, but the actual, what is it that makes us utter this word? What is the condition? And is it possible for a moment to listen to it without expecting anything of it? Not listen in order for it to go away or become clear, but to just be with what's there. With this moment of really unconditional attention. It's not murkiness or haziness. It's something else. It starts to reveal itself. Maybe a deep resistance, fear, whatever. Not to get stuck in the words. We're so happy once we have a new name for something. And then we stick with a word and what it evokes in the brain and then throughout the body, and we're again separate from what it is that we're naming. One person mentioned, as I look back over the years, when I started this work, there was a certain energy, the energy of, here I've got a path that was still at the time that one had the goal of enlightenment and the vow to attain it, and the path to travel. And as the person mentioned, there was great anxiety that drove this person to practice, and the hope of somehow or other managing this anxiety, which the practice did. And with in the meantime, anxiety sort of having abated somewhat, and the goal dropped because one has seen its idea. And the practice, where is it that Toni talked one out of it? Or has one noticed that in holding on to a practice, again, there isn't the openness to what is actually happening. One has something to focus on away from what is really happening. But the person says, now I rather feel indifferent, as though I didn't care. And there's something disquieting about this feeling of indifference and not caring. Which I'm sure is nothing strange to us. We all know it from memory. Maybe it's going on right now. One person used to say to me, you talk about the walks and the rustling of the leaves and the wind and so forth. To me, as I walk through the woods, I could care less. Somehow or other, I'm not in touch. And because I'm not in touch, I don't care. I feel indifferent. But see what happens. One wants to be in touch with the woods, with the wind or the sounds, away from touching this, what one calls indifference and not caring. We're always on some kind of an escape route, away from what actually is happening right now, unless it is great joy and happiness and pleasure, then we have no problem, except fearing it may end. And that thought may end it. But how to touch indifference and not caring? Is it possible to be in touch with that? Or boredom? People say, I came here with such expectations of quietness and quiet retreat and peace and equanimity, and here I feel bored. What is boredom? There is not a moment of this living or being alive that doesn't merit attention, wondering about it. What is it? Not on such a personal level, but on a very deep, universal level, because one is exploring our human living, which is so beset with problems. Stress, conflict, conflagration, hatred, inability to love. One person mentioned, I'm constantly, almost incessantly blamed by my spouse, being put down for what I do or don't do. but I don't know what it is that I do or don't do. We don't want to enter into the complexity of someone projecting onto one. We'll leave that maybe for another time. But I'm just use that to say, what are we doing? How are we coming on? One person said, everybody dumps on me. I must be a good dumping ground. Why don't they dump on others? Always dump on me. But how are we relating to ourselves and each other? How are we talking? Are we listening? Are we full of ourselves? And because so full of ourselves and our needs, our concerns, our worries, our self-image and wanting to be approved and be important, so filled that there's no space to listen and be sensitively in touch with others around us who may be just as full of themselves too. I don't know. But it has to be open and listen. Have some space for that. Some listening space to be in sensitive touch. Not just with what's going on in oneself, but what is going on around one. But we've gotten away from trying to find out what is indifference, no care, no caring. There's no caring attitude or boredom or the murky haziness or whatever state there may be. What is it? If we don't know it, don't name it, don't want to get rid of it, fight it or accept it, none of that. Just this, without escape. Without moving away. And if movement away happens, can it be noticed? If not, then there's the moving away. But there will be a moment of attention again. Then where are we? Not where was I? That state is gone. That moment is finished. What's going on now? Inside and out. Not, I must concentrate upon myself now. No such thing has been said. It's not a concentration or a focusing on oneself. It's an awareness that wonders what's going on. And because there's wondering, there's awareness. It may sound circular, but it isn't circular. I'm wondering what is going on right now, therefore I must listen. If we walk together down the hill, across the bridge, and we're talking, but there are some sounds of the creek spilling over the rocks. You or I may say, let's listen for a moment. Let's just listen. And I'm quite sure both of us will stop walking and stop talking and listen. because there's something more going on than our conversation. So then the question comes up, well, what should I listen to? The feeling of indifference or murkiness inside, or the bird outside, or someone moving, or sound of the wind? What should I listen to first? What's my priority? That's thought coming in, isn't it? Thought can only think of one thing at a time. Even though there can be unconscious thoughts going on in the background. But consciously focusing, one can only, with thought, only on one thing. But in awareness, that's different. When thought isn't constantly naming, reacting, describing, explaining, this is because of that, which is a deeply ingrained habit, constantly explaining something. As thought is doing that, of course there is nothing else being attended to. But if something is heard and thought, even though the urge is there to name, to react, to explain, but the urge can be seen and one doesn't have to go with it. One listens. Then, by not naming indifference or boredom, and not naming sounds of people, and not naming airplane, and not naming wind. I'm doing it right now because we're talking. But in sitting, if this isn't all named and evaluated and reacted to and associated with other things and explained, if it's just listened to, it all exists in the same listening space without interference. This is not how we have been brought up, educated. We have been educated to concentrate on one thing. At the expense of everything else. And therefore, if somebody says it's possible to listen openly to all sorts of things happening inside and out, somebody may argue with and say that's impossible, or that's what you believe, but I don't believe it. It's not a matter of belief. I'm not propagating a belief. It's for each one to come upon ourselves. And it can only happen if we're not fixed to a belief that it is impossible or possible, but wondering what's happening right now. With a mind that does not withdraw in fear or move in expectation. We will end here for today.